Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. It's now my favorite season, and that is So if you recognize those photos, those are camellias. So camellia season is my favorite season in the garden every year. Right now, specifically Camellia sasanqua time, but I'm going to throw you a curveball at the end of this video. We have Camellia sasanquas that bloom in the fall, and Camellia japonicas typically bloom after the first of the year, the late winter and the early spring. Camellia sasanquas tend to be the best here in Zone 7 overall. Just because we get long extended falls and we get very reliable flowering on them. Sometimes our late winters can really be kind of up and down, and we can have inconsistent Camellia japonica seasons just because the flowers will open and then it'll get cold, yada yada. They're hardy in Zone 7 to 9. They're evergreen shrubs. They really don't even need to bloom in some cases because the plants are just so nice looking. This one was featured in Bobby Green's video recently. He's introduced the three actually that are sitting in this space. This is Camellia sasanqua, crimson, and clover. And if you watch that video, this was a much lighter flower color down at his place in Fairhope, Alabama. What happens here is the nights get cooler, and we've had cooler nights obviously up here than they've had in Alabama so far. The flowers get darker and darker, and it becomes almost this crimson red color, which is really super striking. This is a very early flowerer, so when they first started flowering, they were lighter, and as the season goes on, it'll bloom for about 2 months, the flowers have gotten darker and darker. You can really tell by the growth habit on a camellia. Like, I can look at one in a container and kind of tell whether it's a big one or not. This one has all this growth on it. It's kind of vertical. This one's going to end up quite large, so it's with intent that it's in the back here and it's going to screen up the street for me. The two that are in the front of it are dwarfs, and there's been a variety around forever called Shishi Gashera, which is a dwarf, but we saw one at Bobby's house that had reached probably 15 feet tall over a very, very long period of time. But these two right here are two introductions he's made that were actually meant to be dwarf. This is a white shishi, and it has a beautiful double white flower. They haven't started opening. As you can see in these Camellia sasanquas, you get early flowering ones, and then you get ones that are slightly later. And then this is one that hasn't been released. I guess this next year there'll be some availability on this light pink shishi. So it's like it's a pale pink double flower, but really love these two compact varieties, and a lot of the plant breeding that we're seeing here in camellias now allows us to have good compact evergreen camellias that won't eat your entire lot, because I'm only on 2/10 of an acre here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have 4 camellias in the front garden. This is a Camellia japonica called Lemon Glow. This is absolutely one of my favorite Camellia japonicas. This is a beautiful flower. I bought this plant from Camellia Forest last year in a 1 gallon, and it's next to a maple over here. These like part shade, but I'm going to give you an example of going into too much shade in just a minute. This one's getting the appropriate amount of light. It has flower buds on it. It's going to bloom again February, March, something like that, as soon as the nighttime temperatures start to warm up in the late winter a bit. I think the most viewed video on my channel is about planting in clay, and in that video I planted a camellia on purpose because I wanted to show specifically, camellias in my clay soils here in the Piedmont of North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia need to be elevated a little bit in our clay soils. Well, I elevated this one, and then I planted it next to a very greedy maple over here. So this one initially defoliated a little bit down at the bottom. It's filling back in and it looks good, but I kind of want to stress that even though this thing went through a bit of a drought crisis, or a dry crisis, where it actually had to shed some leaves, overall, in the long term, I'm better off than having planted it too deep and then ended up overwatering it because I can't recover from overwatering them, but I can recover from underwatering them. And so it's recovering beautifully. Lots of flower buds on it. This one's going to get quite big in this space, and again, help me create a screen back here behind me. But this is Lemon Glow, Camellia japonica Lemon Glow, one of my absolute favorites. Since I've had this channel, on every camellia video, one of the things that's down below it, one of the questions that will always be down below it is why don't mine bloom that well? And I think it's one of the keys on camellias is this part shade thing. I think sometimes we think of part shade as just shade. And camellias do need some bright light. They need some direct sun. If you put them in too much shade, you can definitely limit the number of flowers you will get. This Bella Rouge is a great example of that. This plant looks fantastic. It's actually covered in what will be new growth next year. Great looking plant, but I only have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 flower buds on this plant, as compared to what you saw on the front 3 Sasanquas and a couple more that are coming up. They're just absolutely covered in flower buds. And the reason this one is limited, again, the plant's doing fine, but it's very limited on flower buds just because of the low light. So keep that in mind. You want to pick a spot where they're not going to cook in the middle of the day between 10 and 2, but you need at least some morning sun or some late day direct sun on your camellias. Going back to Bobby Green's video again, this is October Magic Orchid. This is the one that's near the beginning of that video, and he's got them maintained about 4 to 5 feet as kind of round balls. This one you can tell by the growth habit again. This is a Camellia Sasanqua that's going to get some height on it over the years, and it can be. This would be a good candidate to espalier. That's another thing I should bring up in a camellia video. Is these are great candidates to be grown just flat against a wall, and just lend themselves for that. I did a tour video a year or so ago that's quite popular, and a lady had giant Camellia Sasanquas espaliered on her house. This is another example of the sun having an impact on a camellia. The side you're looking at here has the majority of the flowers, and during the summer the sun was actually on that side of it. So that's another interesting component here. Camellias can be pruned after, the Camellia japonicas can be pruned after they bloom in the spring. These Camellia Sasanquas they're going to bloom in the fall, and they can be pruned in the late winter, early spring if you need to get after them hard. If you just have a crazy branch here or there that's outgrown the rest of the plant or is growing off to the side somewhere, you can cut that off 12 months of the year. The very first plant that went in this landscape project almost 2 years ago now was this October Magic Ruby. And this thing is absolutely loaded with flower buds. This may be my favorite Camellia Sasanqua at this point. It has great red flowers, kind of ruby red flowers. Great compact habit. I mean, this hasn't been touched with a pair of pruners in the 2 years it's been in the ground, and it's just super, super compact. Basically bud to bud to bud on this thing. This thing will be blooming, right up till Christmas in all likelihood. So I've red flowers at Christmas. How can you beat that? Deer tend to stay away from camellias, but they definitely, the flower buds are very tempting to them. So if you have deer issues, keep that in mind. Typically, again, they don't really go after the plant, but they will come along and take your flower buds. They'll do that on a lot of different plants. I consider camellias amongst the most drought-tolerant leafy evergreen shrubs we can have here in the Southeast. It just amazes me. I can go to and see old farmhouses and things that have been abandoned, and camellias that haven't been watered or taken care of by any person in decades still look absolutely fantastic without any real human interaction. I do fertilize, and I fertilize everything in my landscape in the late winter, and I use a very small amount of organic fertilizer on these. The main thing I'm doing is giving them plenty of bed space, to keep their roots cool and regulate the moisture, and of course keeping weeds away from them. And if it gets abnormally dry, I'll water them, but for the most part, an established Camellia japonica or Sasanqua in the landscape isn't going to need much from you. So I said I'd finish this video with a twist, and this is that twist. This is a Camellia japonica called Early Wonder. It's called Early Wonder because it blooms in the fall, where typically most of our Camellia japonicas are going to to be flowering, and here in my area, February, March, maybe even into early April. Depends on when the winter kind of lets up as to when these flower buds will start to open. But here we are in the fall. This is a great thing for me here again in Zone 7 because, you know, like I say, the winter when most Camellia japonicas would want to be flowering can be, you know, all over the place and can damage a lot of these open flowers. But here we are in October. I've got 2 flowers open today and lots more coming on this plant. This plant's going to get quite large over the years. I've got it below this little window beside the shed, and I may, while it's still small, kind of move it back here behind me where I'm not going to end up blocking this window. The placement might not be perfect. You'll notice on the Camellia japonicas they have slightly larger leaves than on the Camellia sasanquas, but both have beautiful dark green foliage. And again, even without flowers, these would be great evergreen plants. Camellia japonica, same thing, part shade as the Camellia sasanquas, but easy. Honestly, just very easy plants for us in Zone 7, 8, and 9. So thank you guys for watching this video. This is my current Camellia selections on a 0.19 acre lot here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B. I'll probably find a couple spots for a few more before it's over with.